Hey friends, it's me, Em again, and welcome back to my channel where we talk about all things sinister. If you are interested in true crime, or if you like all things horror related, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. That way you can join me for some morbid conversation. So today's case is another weird one. It is a currently unsolved murder case that is completely shrouded in so many unanswered questions and bizarre behavior. We have evidence, we have footage, we have a history of what this man went through, but what we don't have is any answers as to what actually happened or why. All we know is a series of events that led to this man's death, but we don't know who killed him or why they killed him. So, the man in our story is Blair Adams, and what we are going to be doing today is piecing together his story and his timeline of events that led up to his death. It would begin when he started to go through what his family would call mood swings. Blair was typically a pretty chipper and pretty upbeat guy, and he ended up starting to act a little bit paranoid, a little bit moody, and irritable. His mom would ask him what was wrong, and he would tell her, I just don't think I should be telling you. I don't think we need to get into it. So obviously, something was bothering Blair, but he wasn't telling anybody what it was. Now, at this point, Blair had been 2 years sober. But when these mood swings started and when his sullen attitude started, that's also when he stopped going to his AA meetings. Now, I don't know if he relapsed, but we do know that he stopped going to his meetings. So, the first definitive date that we have in this series of very weird events with Blair is July 5th. July 5th, Blair would go to his bank and he would completely close out his savings account, getting all of his money in cash. He would also go to his savings deposit box and he would withdraw all the items in the box, jewelry, platinum, any kind of valuables that he had in the box. He took those out of the bank too. And he did this with the intention of planning on crossing the border. You see, Blair lived in Canada at the time, and he had the intention of crossing the Canadian border into the United States, which he would attempt to do for the first time on July 7th. Now, since Blair had so much cash on him and so much valuables on him, and since he was a single man attempting to cross the border into the United States by himself, he was actually denied entry. And he was denied entry because being a young guy by himself with a ton of cash on him made him look like he was a drug trafficker. And that's what they thought that he was trying to do, was traffic drugs across the border. So they denied him entry on July 7th. But that did not mean that Blair stopped trying. In fact, he would continue to try. So the next day, on July 8th, Blair would actually purchase a round trip ticket to Germany, Frankfurt, Germany, which in itself isn't super unusual because Blair had actually lived and worked in Germany when he worked for his stepfather's construction company beforehand, and had even dated a woman while he was there, who, when she was interviewed later on, said that he had made no connection to her, didn't call her or anything, and let her know that he was coming. So she wasn't the motivation for him purchasing a ticket to Germany. But it is established he did have a life in Germany. So it's weird that he bought a ticket to Germany unprompted, but it's not weird that he chose Germany. It's not like he was just pulling Germany randomly out of a hat. He had lived there beforehand. Now, before he had done anything with this ticket, instead, he went to a friend's house of his. And when he got to this friend's house, he told her that he needed to get across the border. He needed to get into the United States. This friend said that he was acting very panicked during this conversation and had said that somebody was out to get him and somebody was out to kill him. The friend told him she didn't know how to get him across the border. She had no way that she could think of to help him, and Blair ended up just leaving at that point. He left the house and left her. The next day, on the 9th, Blair would be temporarily apprehended for trying to cross the border on foot this time. And he was picked up by officers and he was detained for a short period of time because he actually looked like somebody who had been involved in a carjacking. But he ended up being released because they had no real evidence, and Blair said he didn't do it and they had nothing to hold him on. So they released him. Later on that day, he would go and return the plane ticket that he had purchased to Germany, and instead he would go to the airport, he would rent a Nissan Altima, and then he would use that Nissan Altima to finally successfully cross the border into the United States. And he would make his way into the United States, into the city of Seattle. When he was in the city of Seattle, he would actually end up going to the airport and buying a ticket, a one-way ticket from Seattle to DC, which is another bizarre thing that happened because, according to Lieutenant Jones, one of the men working the case, the round trip ticket from Seattle to DC and back would have been about $400 or $500. A one-way ticket was just under $800. It would have been cheaper for Blair to purchase a round-way ticket and not use the return flight home than it would be to purchase a one-way ticket. But he bought a one-way ticket and he flew from Seattle to DC. When he made it to DC, he would end up renting another car at the airport. And this car he would drive from the airport all the way to Knoxville, Tennessee. Which, again, when his family was interviewed regarding this case, all his friends and family all said Blair knew no one in Knoxville, Tennessee. He had no motivation to go to Knoxville, Tennessee. The only motivation that we have thus far for Blair's erratic behavior and traveling was that friend that he went to see to try to get him across the border. She did say that he was panicked, and she did say that someone was out to kill him. Now, when we are in Tennessee, the first time we have a witness on the case is a gas station attendant in Knoxville, Tennessee. And he had been interviewed and said that Blair had came into the station and had said that he was having trouble getting his car to start. So the attendant went outside to see if he could help Blair figure out what was going on with his car. And the attendant figured it out really quickly. What was wrong with his car was Blair was trying to start it with the wrong car keys. And the attendant pointed this out to Blair and said, "You're trying to start the car. These are not the car keys that goes to this car." And Blair argued with him. "These are the only keys I have." And the attendant, they kind of went back and forth. Like, "Have you checked your pockets? Have you checked, have you checked everything? Because these are not the right keys." And Blair insisted that these were the only keys that he had. So much so that he ended up hitching a ride to a motel and leaving the car there because the rental place was closed. It's not like he could call them and get another key to the car. He hitched a ride to a motel and just left the car there. Which, again, this is another weird thing that happened because he drove himself to the gas station. So at some point, he had to have the keys to this vehicle. But the keys he had were not the right car keys. So at this point, I don't know if he's having like a paranoid psychotic break. I don't know if he's on drugs. His behavior is just all over the place and completely erratic at this point. Finally, we come to our video footage that we have, and that's when Blair makes it to the hotel. And when Blair makes it to the hotel, you can actually see on the lobby camera Blair going in and out, in and out, in and out multiple times before he finally goes up to the counter in the lobby to get a room at the hotel. And you can see him standing at the counter, and he's kind of seeming a little bit nervous, a little bit high strung. He gets his key card to the motel, he pays for it, but he never actually goes to his room. He takes his key card and he leaves the motel. And as far as we know, he never went to his motel room. In fact, this video footage is the last known footage of Blair Adams alive. The next day, on July 11th, about a half mile away from the hotel, Blair's body would be found at a construction site. He was naked from the waist down, shoes were off, socks were inside out, and his shirt was torn open. Blair was covered in scratches and abrasions that the police said looked to be defensive wounds, and he was beat up. He had a cut on his forehead, and ultimately what killed him was a blow to the stomach, hard enough to rupture his stomach and cause sepsis. They're unsure if this blow was caused by a fist or by a weapon, but the cut on his head, the blow to his head, they do think was caused by something like maybe a bat or a crowbar. Police did speculate that Blair may have been sexually assaulted due to the way his clothing looked and to the way his pants were pulled down, but there was no DNA confirming a sexual assault. In fact, the only evidence that they found of the attacker for Blair was one strand of hair that was in his hand, but it wasn't attached to a follicle, so they weren't really able to do anything at all with it. So one of the wildest parts about this story to me is when his talk screen came back, it was completely negative. There were no drugs and no alcohol found in his system, which kind of blew my mind because when I first started reading about this behavior and about this pattern of events, and especially since he had stopped going to AA at the beginning of the story, I just assumed that he had relapsed and maybe had gotten into something harder because this seemed like a drug-fueled, motivated frenzy that he was on, but he was completely clean and sober. There was nothing in his system that could have caused this kind of reaction. There was no drugs or alcohol in his system. So the next thing I thought was like, okay, mental breakdown, like something happened to make him mentally snap to cause this kind of behavior. But he has no family history whatsoever of any kind of mental health issue in this nature, which isn't definitive proof because mental health can just rear up at any point. But the police seem pretty confident that it wasn't a mental health issue. But even if it was, let's pretend like his behavior was completely motivated by a mental snap. Is it a coincidence that he wound up murdered after all this erratic behavior where he's thinking he's being chased and he's thinking somebody's out to kill him? Because that's a pretty big coincidence. And I'm not one who believes in a lot of coincidences. That's a pretty big coincidence. People aren't killed every day. So let's say it wasn't a mental break. And let's say that it wasn't drug fueled. Let's say somebody really was out to get Blair and they succeeded. The skill this person would have had because his behavior was so erratic and so unpredictable. Tries to cross the border once, denied. Tries to cross the border on foot, denied. Buys a ticket to Germany, throwing him off the scent, returns the ticket to Germany, rents a car, makes it across the border into Seattle, immediately flies from Seattle to Washington, D.C., rents a car, and drives from D.C. to Knoxville, Tennessee. If someone was following him through all those different points, that in itself is insane to me. If somebody was able to completely and successfully follow him from Canada to Knoxville, Tennessee, with all that erratic, impulsive behavior. And not only that, once he was in Tennessee, The person followed him from the gas station to a hotel that he hitched a ride with a stranger. So it's like adding another, I don't know. That seems far fetched. Now, this happened in 1996. Like I said, it's an unsolved case. We don't know who killed him, we don't know why. Another thing that makes it very bizarre, though, when he was found with over $4,000 Canadian, German, and US currency spread around his body. Over $2,000 worth of valuables in like his little fanny pack that he had taken from his safe deposit box. I'm talking jewelry, I'm talking platinum, just $2,000 worth of valuables, all spread around him. So it wasn't a random robbery gone wrong. What the hell happened to this guy? So here are some of the theories that I have come across, and I will tell you a personal theory that I have, but I mean, I don't know. This is all just guesswork. Theory one, it was a mental break, and he snapped and he had paranoid delusions where he thought that somebody was out to get him. He thought that he was being chased. He ran from them until he made it to Knoxville, Tennessee. He left the hotel room looking for something, saw a construction site, which he's very familiar with. He worked construction in Canada. He went to Germany and worked construction, went to that construction site, and in his mental break had ended up beating himself up and committing suicide by jumping off of something, which could result in a blow to the stomach, which could rupture your stomach. That's one theory. Maybe. Another theory is, yeah, somebody really did follow him all the way from Canada, all the way to Tennessee. They purposely did not take his valuables, but they spread them around him to send a message. So maybe he was involved in something dirty, maybe something the message isn't going to come across to you and I, but if he was involved in like a drug cartel or something, it would send a message to the people within that cartel. That's another theory I saw. I don't know how accurate that was. Like I said, he had been in AA. He seemed to be doing great before this moment. I don't know if I believe that he was some sort of person hooked up into like some sort of drug lord crime world. I don't believe that. What I think it may have been is I think it may have been a combination of things where I think maybe it was, I know I talk a lot about mental health and it seems like I want to blame everything on mental health, but that's all this is, really. I mean, if you get down to it, why do people do the things they do? It's because of what's going on up here, you know? And all mental health isn't created equal, but our mental health does dictate who we are and the actions we do to an extent, right? So I think maybe he did have a mental breakdown. I don't know what caused it, but I think that he did have that. I do think he was delusional. I think he was maybe even hallucinating some stuff that caused him to run. I believe he thought someone was out to get him, which caused his erratic behavior. I believe when he made it to the motel, he went out for a walk that night. He may have went to go get something to eat. He may have went to just go clear his head. I think maybe he stumbled into someone and in the state that he was in, thought that this person may be the person who was out to get him, which caused him to be on the offensive or defense. I don't know sports terms. Aggressive. Maybe he was a little aggressive with this person he bumped into, thinking this person was the person who was sent to kill him that doesn't actually exist. And maybe this fight between him and this innocent bystander who just happened to be on the wrong side of somebody who's delusional. Maybe this innocent bystander got the upper hand, punched him in the stomach, went to leave him, didn't realize how hard he had hit him, and he died. Um, it seems like every theory is a far-fetched one, honestly. It seems like every theory is unbelievable to a certain extent, and it's just a matter of what's the most believable out of the unbelievable. But I really don't know. What theories have you heard? Have you heard of this? I'm sure you've heard of this case. But if you haven't, look into it, read about it, become obsessed with it, and drop your theories down below, or drop your favorite theory that you come across, because I just know it's really freaking weird. Like, it's really weird. I don't know. I wish we knew. And there you have it. There's another unsatisfying ending to a cold case that has been cold for over 2 decades now. And though we don't have the answers, it is still interesting to look at, and it is still kind of fun to speculate and think about. So if you have any theories, like I said, I would love to hear them down in the comments down below. If this is the kind of content that interests you, make sure you do hit that like and subscribe button. Turn on all your post notifications. That way you can be notified the next time I sit down right here for another morbid chat. And until next time, as always, friends, as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll talk to you later. All right? Bye.